So welcome up Alex and Meagan McDonald.
What's happening, StuMo? How are we doing tonight? Like Aaron said, I'm Alex. This is my wife, Meagan.
Hi.
We are excited to be with you guys tonight for a Valentine's-themed StuMo. We're going to be talking a little bit about God's plan for love and for relationships. But before we hop into that, here's a picture of our family. There's our little girl, Millie. This is at her second birthday party. She doesn't always wear a crown. This is her second birthday party.
She would love to.
Just a couple weeks ago. Millie's awesome. She loves gymnastics right now. She goes to gymnastics class. She's really good at it. She loves soccer. She loves cats.
Not as good at soccer.
She's not as good at soccer. Gymnastics is more her thing. But yeah, that's our family. And we also have a second one on the way.
Yes, Wesley is due in April. Yes, Wes. Still no middle name picked out, so you can enter submissions. You know, we're really trying to figure that one out. But yeah, he's due soon, and he is big. So he is measuring 3 weeks big. And when the doctor told me that, I said, I feel that. So we'll see if he comes March or April. You can take bets.
There we go. Yeah, so how did we get here? How did we end up like this? You know, we weren't always together. Actually, Meagan and I met in college, where all great romances truly begin to blossom. At a fraternity party.
At a fraternity party. Yeah, so I was a sophomore. Alex was a freshman. Yes, he is a younger man. And I had just gone to my very first Kaleo. Who here knows what that is? Yes. I'm sure several of you are going to Kaleo this summer. It's incredible. I love Kaleo. I think I've been to like 14 Kaleos over the years. But I had just gone to my first Kaleo. I had made some great friends. And one of them was Taylor Coy. He was over at the Pike House. And so me and some of my Chi-O friends, I was a Chi-O in college, went over to the Pike House and we're like, hey, let's go hang out. Some of our Kaleo friends. And in walks this like 6'3", super jacked freshman with like kind of a Brillo-y buzz cut and some super nerdy glasses. There he is in all his glory. Yes, there's Alex McDonald. And I remember being like, man, like, you know, I'm seeing Alex become friends with Taylor and things like that. And I knew Taylor was someone who was making an impact in his fraternity for God, telling his fraternity brothers about who Jesus was. And I was like, man, I wonder what's going to happen in Alex's life.
Yeah, and so Meagan and I met, but we actually wouldn't date for, I guess it was 5 years before we went on our first dates. We just kind of got to know each other. And it was honestly probably a pretty good thing we didn't start dating, because I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but I didn't know what I was doing at all as a freshman when it came to love and romance. I had a lot to learn. You know, I had a little bit of experience with dating. You know, I think the first time I was really like seriously interested in a girl was actually 8th grade. I was really, really interested in this girl. And so I told some of my buddies, we were spending the night at my buddy's house. I told them, like, hey, I have a crush on this girl. And they, like any solid, you know, self-respecting 8th graders, jumped on AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, you know, kind of slid into her DMs and said, hey, Alex likes you. I was like, oh no, that is not what I wanted to happen. In their 8th grade wisdom, they're like, this is really what's best for you,
This is what we do.
I was like, what? Am I awake? Like, what? That's not what I want to happen at all. So I show up Monday to school. This girl walks up to me. She says, hey, Alex, I got the message. I'm like, oh gosh. She's like, you know what? I think we should just be friends. Ugh, stab to the heart.
Boo, Katie sucks.
It's okay. It doesn't end there. Fast forward a few years, we're juniors in high school in chemistry class. Me and this girl get paired up to be lab partners. And, you know, we'd grown, we'd matured. I'd say there was chemistry happening in a couple senses of the term in chem lab.
Dad joke.
And we started dating. We dated for about a year, didn't know what we were doing at all, broke up. And so I came into college, again, just not really knowing what I was doing, what I was looking for. And I didn't really know like who to look to for an example, right? And so that freshman year, I wasn't yet following Jesus. I was just trying to figure out, what does this look like? I remember there's a couple of girls who I had relationships with. We kind of didn't call it anything. You know, we'd hang out a lot. Sometimes do things boyfriends, girlfriends did, but we wouldn't say we were boyfriend, girlfriend. And it was just kind of confusing, you know? I didn't really know what I was looking for or who I was looking for advice, right? Was I supposed to do what my fraternity brothers were doing? What was culture saying around me? Where do you even go for answers on this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's common whenever you just don't know what to do. It's like, what do? We Google. You know, it's like, oh, How do I date? I don't know. And so, but it's funny, when you think about it, like, I think what our culture would say about love and romance and dating, I think that there's probably a lot that you would find on the internet, a lot that you will find in the media, right? Think about all of the TV shows that are just totally my guilty pleasure for like reality dating, right? It started with The Bachelor back, I don't even remember when it started. It feels like it's always been there. But The Bachelor, really reigned supreme for like 10 to 15 years. But since The Bachelor, there's like 30 plus TV shows now just dedicated to reality dating. Some of them are, The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, still out there, Bachelor in Paradise, Love is Blind, US, Brazil, and Japan. They're really expanding. The Ultimatum, Too Hot to Handle, 90 Day Fiancé, Indian matchmaking, Jewish matchmaking, Love Island, Married at First Sight, Love on the Spectrum, and some with names too edgy for me to say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely look them up. And so what do we see? Our culture is honestly pretty fascinated with this idea of dating and romance. I mean, just by the sheer volume of shows on the subject matter. And it is fascinating to see if, two people are going to work out. Maybe for some it's more fascinating if they don't work out, But where do we go for these answers? Well, if we look to culture, really we get some different answers, The world's encouragement, I would say, the world and the culture around us is to go all the way physically, all the way emotionally in a relationship, right? And to use that relationship really to make you happy, right? Go all the way physically, all the way emotionally. In some ways, use the other person to meet your needs, and romance is meant for fun. And so you do this until someone hurts you, or you get bored in that relationship and someone new comes along. Then the culture's encouragement would be, yeah, by all means, leave that person and find a different situation, Dating is ultimately about you. And what happens is, man, we get in these types of relationships, we go all the way and then tear it apart, and man, that hurts, that's painful. I've been there, And it's just not what God designed us to be in. It's not the types of relationships that God designed us to be in. That's really the culture's encouragement, right? If you watch these shows, just get advice from culture around, it says, hey, your relationships are all about you. Romance is all about you. And really this process is not working. It's not working. The stats are honestly a little bit bleak. The national divorce rate is somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all marriages ending in divorce, depending on which stats you look at. So in other words, it's like 33% to 50% of all marriages in the U.S. actually end in divorce. Further, the stats would show in a recent survey that polled married couples, about 30% of couples who are married wish they weren't in that married relationship. They're not happy in it, but it's too complicated to get out. Things like finances, kids, etc. That same survey actually found that only about 20% of marriages, people were actually happy in the marriage. Some quick math, that's what, 50, 30, 80% are in a kind of negative situation and 20% are in a positive situation. Nobody thinks that's going to happen to them, even though it's like the majority of situations in the U.S. right now. So if we were just to look at culture's way of coming together in romance, the stats alone would say, hey, this end product, this isn't working. Something is a little bit off. And so again, that's why we wanted to talk about love and romance at StuMo tonight, because God actually has a plan that's way better than the culture's plan. God, what we're going to see, loves romance. He created it, and he really wants us to experience the best of it. And we do that when we experience it his way. So tonight, we want to share 3 truths in the Bible about romance and what we can be doing now, really no matter what your relationship status is, whether you're single, dating, etc. I don't know what etc. would be. I don't know if anyone else is married. We're married. But wherever you're at, how can we apply this? How can we look at what God's plan is for romance and apply it to our life? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So the first truth in the Bible that we want to look at is that romance was created by God. Romance was created by God. It's really pretty cool that God created romance, and he created it pretty early on. If you were to open to the very beginning of your Bible, you'd be in the book of Genesis, and in chapter 1, it talks about how God created essentially everything. He said, let there be light, and there was light. And as God is creating the earth, the water, the stars, the planets, the animals. Again and again, God says it was good. He created the earth and saw that it was good. He created the planets and he saw that it was good. He creates the animals. He creates a man in his own image, a man named Adam. And he says, this is good. This is man. He's in my own image. This is good. But then he says, man by himself, it's not good. After creating all these things and saying it's good, he says, man by himself is not good. Here it is literally. It says, the Lord God said it's not good for man to be alone. So what does he do? He creates a helper suitable for him. When God was creating, he knew that we were meant for relationship. In fact, he created us for relationships. And what's awesome is God, the very first type of relationship he creates, other than the relationship between creator and creation, the first relationship between two people is actually a romantic one. He creates Eve to be a partner for Adam. It's awesome. And he continues to flesh out what it means. He says, this is why man leaves his father and mother and he's united to his wife and they become one flesh. And so he lays out a plan for romance. He says, what's cool is humans are going to mature and then they're going to team up together and go out into the world and start their own family. And they're going to become united to one another in a way that is so intimate. They're going to be such a close-knit team that it's as if they are one person. They are one flesh. Dude, how romantic is that? God created that type of relationship, that depth of relationship, that beautiful picture of what relationship is. And so we talk about romance and we look at what the culture has to say. Man, nothing compares to that. Nothing compares to God's incredible plan for romance that he wants us to experience. So as we have these feelings surrounding romance, these desires, those are good things created by God. And because he's the designer, he's really the definer. He knows exactly what it should look like and how it should be. And so we can trust him in that. So that's point number one, that romance was created by God.
Yeah, so point number 2 is romance is a reflection of God's commitment to believers. Romance is a reflection of God's commitment to believers. So we're going to look at a verse that kind of unpacks this. It says, Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This is a massive call, right? This is huge to say, husbands, love your wives like how Christ died for the salvation of many people, right? And what's crazy is whenever I think about Jesus dying on the cross, I don't think it was like, man, this feels good. This is easy. These people, man, there's just so much compatibility and chemistry flow in here. No, that was not the feeling of Jesus dying on the cross. It was a feeling of love that was based off of commitment, right? And, when Alex and I said to each other yes at the altar, we knew that commitment was based off of the reflection of the gospel, based off of the reflection of Jesus, having that commitment of, hey, no matter the obstacle, no matter what you are like, I believe it or not, I am not always lovable. It is some days hard probably for Alex to choose to be committed to me. But I'm so grateful that is a marriage commitment, that romance is a reflection of God's commitment to believers. That creates a really secure and thriving marriage.
Yeah, totally. And so we can see there's some contrast to the way the culture says to do things, right? Culture says, hey, go all the way physically, all the way emotionally, and maybe consider commitment later. Whereas God says, man, romance is meant to be built on commitment. The physical and emotional depth is meant to be experienced in the safety of commitment. So, it's an awesome privilege that God would say, hey, romance has a purpose. Not only is it going to be something that's awesome, but it's going to reflect my relationship with you. And so that leads us into our last point here about the truths from the Bible, is that romance is designed to be enjoyable. Romance is designed to be enjoyable. God made romance to be a good time. The emotional connection you have, the friendship, the companionship you have with someone else, the physical connection, the sexual part of the relationship, God created to be a good thing. If you don't believe me, check out Proverbs 15:18 through 19. Taylor wouldn't let me put it on the screen in here. It's racy. But God is talking about the type of romance that should happen between a husband and a wife. And it's awesome. Look it up later. Have a cold shower ready.
What?
But hey, there are some limitations in God's plan as well that are meant for our joy to experience it. In Matthew 5, Jesus says, hey, if a man even looks at a woman lustfully, he's committed adultery in his heart. God is serious about protecting that type of Proverbs 5 relationship to be experienced in marriage, to be experienced in, like I said, the safety of that connection. Some of you guys are out there looking up the verse.
I was going to say, I'm just looking at the verse right now.
But check this out. This is interesting. Not that yet. That will be interesting. God designed sex for marriage, and we can actually, modern scientific discovery has, helped us really confirm that. There's a hormone called oxytocin, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, that is known as the bonding hormone, and it's released 2 times in life. It's once when you have a baby, so when a woman goes through the intense labor of childbirth and then has that baby with her, she produces oxytocin. And what that's meant to do is bond her to that baby. So when she's exhausted later, she still takes care of it. It's an amazing mechanism that God put into the human body, right? He used the hormones, make stuff happen. Oxytocin is released one other time, and it's actually between 2 people when they have sex with each other, that a bonding hormone is released. And it's, again, a mechanism used by God to solidify that commitment that they were designed for. It's fascinating, guys. And so, again, part of why that God wants us to wait until marriage for this type of thing is that it was meant to bond us closely, to keep us committed. It's why if you've had relationships where you get physical and things along those lines, it's harder to break up. The breakup is more difficult. Maybe some of you know who this is. Wilt Chamberlain. Talented basketball player. Don't throw anything at me, but maybe the best to ever play the game.
Did he say it?
He's the only guy in NBA history to score 100 points by himself in a single game. That's a very impressive stat, but he's also known for another impressive stat. Wilt Chamberlain, in his autobiography, claims to have had sex with 20,000 different women. That's a lot. So to put that into perspective, that would be having sex with one person a day for 55 years. That's insane. And you guys dude, there's no way. He's just saying that. Experts who are writing literature on this guy interviewed his friends and teammates and hey, is this claim true? And all of them were yeah, I think it probably was true. This is what this guy was known for. So if there's anyone who's experienced it sort of the opposite of God's plan, it'd be this guy. He kind of did the research for us, right? And what's really fascinating is in that same autobiography, here is what Wilt had to say on the matter. He said, with all you men out there who think that having 1,000 different ladies is pretty cool, I've learned in my life, I've found out that having one woman 1,000 times is much more satisfying. Again, you would think he's had the experience. Surely this crazy, experience that the world and culture would totally uplift, would just be awesome. He found at the end of the day, in his old age, looking back at life, man, I wish I'd invested more in one relationship. Friends, it's the way that God designed it, not to limit our joy, but to multiply it. Pretty cool. So, our 3 points from the Bible is that romance was created by God. Romance is a reflection of God's commitment to believers, and romance is designed to be enjoyable. And so again, there's some contrast between God's way and the world's way. Like I was saying earlier, the world says, hey, go all the way physically, all the way emotionally, and put off that commitment to later. And God says, hey, no, it's way better to do it the way I designed it, to be committed to one another. So the bottom line is this: God designed romance. It's meant to bring us closer to Him. It's meant to be experienced His way. So what can we do now?
Yeah, I would summarize those points as just, we can see the world's way is, have fun, and God's way is be intentional, right? Just be intentional with this. It has a purpose. And so our next 3 points are going to be things that we can do, things that you can do. If you're someone who wants to be in a romantic relationship, now or someday, there are 3 things that we have for you guys that we feel like you can do. The first one is pursue clarity. Pursue clarity. Whenever I have talked to girls in college now, it reminds me a lot still of my college experience. Like Aaron said, we've been on staff for 10 years, but it doesn't sound like a ton has changed on it sounds like people are still whatevering. So what I mean by that, I find whatevering as kind of a sometimes maybe romantic relationship that you're unsure if it is. I can think of some people back in my sorority who they just all 4 years with the same guy was constant drama, right? It was like we're at the fraternity party. There's always tears of some kind of he's going to bring that girl to the party, but we haven't really defined, are we together? But I take him to all my date parties and he buys my meals sometimes. And it just sounds really hurtful and confusing, right? And so this kind of whatevering that is undefined. If we look at the Bible, like we have said, God takes dating, he takes romantic relationships seriously. And so a way to do that, a way to get closer to God's plan would be to actually pursue clarity. So guys, actually asking out on a date, girls saying a clear yes or no, not kind of just whatevering and sliding into DMs.
Yeah, and don't hear us mean any judgment by this.
No, we did it.
And when I was in college, there was plenty of whatevering, and I didn't know what I was doing, like I said earlier. But we believe, just as we've seen in our lives, that pursuing clarity is just so helpful. So, I actually asked Meagan out when we had both graduated from college. We had gotten to know each other a little bit better. And I had taken a break from dating for a little while. I was like, hey, I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to ask Meagan, young at the time, out on a date. And fellas, picking up the phone and asking a girl on a date, that's a vulnerable thing. That's pretty scary, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna ask this girl on a date. We work together. What if she says no? Beep. This is kind of scary, right? So I remember standing in my room. It's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Dude, you got this.
I love picturing this.
You don't got this. Okay, come on. Okay. What are you going to say? Okay, Meagan, what are you going to do with me? Got it. Okay. Hit send. Phone rings. She hangs up on me. It rings one time. Are you kidding me?
Oops. Okay, in my defense, I was talking to someone. Alex and I, those 5 years, we didn't whatever. I clearly knew, we are friends, and he's not pursuing anybody. We're just friends. We're both following God. We would both join staff with StuMo, and we were just kind of doing our own thing. But Alex was definitely somebody that I respected a ton. We enjoyed each other, but it was clear that we were just friends. And so whenever I see his phone number come up, I'm not thinking at all, oh yes, this is the moment. He's finally asking me out.
Yeah, big moment for me.
Yeah. So I'm just like, whatever, I'll call you back. And so I finally do call him back. I'm actually driving over to the Coy's house for dinner. And I'm like, oh, I should probably call him. And so I give him a call, and he asks me one random question. I just yammer, and then I'm almost to the Coy's house. I'm like, well, anyways, gotta go. And he's like, no, wait. I was like, what? And he's like, I really enjoyed getting to know you over the last 5 years. I'd like to get to know you better. Can I take you on a date next Saturday? And I swear there was a high pitch noise that I just. That's all I heard. And everything went fuzzy. And I was actually, I said, I was driving to the Coy's, and I was supposed to be turning left, but I just kept driving straight. And as I go to say yes, a car honks at me to let me know I'm driving into oncoming traffic. So I go, yes!
I'm like, I guess things are going okay.
Yeah. So he felt good about himself. But yeah, no, I respected so much that Alex, actually, he defined, hey, we're going from a friendship to I am romantically interested in you. I was not unsure. I wasn't man, does he want to be here? I don't know. It was man, I respect so much that he was clear on that.
Yeah, and so a huge reason that we've landed at this piece of advice is if you think about it, God created romance for a purpose. It was intentional, right? he saw, it's not good for man to be alone. Let me create a helper, and I'm going to create this awesome thing. By pursuing clarity in our romantic relationships, we're moving all that closer to God's plan of this having a purpose, not the world's plan of it just being kind of whatever. All right, up next, what else can you do? Oh, hey, there's what we looked like.
Oh, babies.
Forgot about that. Yeah, that was a while ago. Cool. Anyway. So the next thing you can do is evaluate standards. Evaluate standards. And what I really mean by this is like think about the type of person you would want to date and only date that type of person. Maybe create what's like a non-negotiable list. Like, man, these are some things I want to be true of someone I would get into a romantic relationship with, and just stick to that. So why do I say that? Well, when you go on a first date with someone, it automatically becomes the worst way to get to know someone. I mean, what was the question we just answered before this? What's the worst food to eat on a first date? Like, why is that so bad? You're trying to put your best foot forward on that first date, right? And so when you ask someone on a date, you go on that first date, it's like, you put on clothes you've never worn before. Maybe you bought it for the date. You go to a place you've never eaten before. You're like, this is cool. Like, this is like an upscale place and whatever, fancy. And like the whole thing is about putting your best foot forward. And that's not bad. Guys, we all do that. I don't mean any judgment there. But what's really cool is when you start to evaluate, man, what would be my standards? What would be sort of my list of non-negotiables for someone I would date? It helps us to navigate some of that before we're even in a dating situation with someone. It allows us to say, hey, there's some people around me. Man, this person is pursuing their relationship with God. I'm trying to pursue my relationship with God. Hey, that's cool. You can just kind of file that away, And so it's really, really helpful to have some standards, to evaluate standards, have a non-negotiable list. It just helps you pump the brakes and to, again, date intentionally like we were talking about earlier. I mean, I think about before I asked Meagan out on a date, I just noticed that she made a ton of decisions that were based on her faith. She didn't just talk about it, but she actually, did things. She was willing to move across the country to help start a ministry. That's what I was also wanting to do. We had some vision, some life goals that really started to bring us together. And because of that, we were able to go on a first date already knowing quite a bit about each other and knowing that we're on the same page in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I had known Alex for 5 years leading up to that. And what's great is that we just got to know each other. I got to know his character, amongst friends. I got to know it not whenever I'm afraid to, what am I look like when I'm eating? You know what I mean? Like, it's like you said, like dating is you kind of put on a facade sometimes. And so we got to know each other in a way that was a lot more genuine over that time. And whenever he called to ask me out, it was a no-brainer decision because I had seen his character be the same and only growing, right? I knew Alex, like I said, I met him at the fraternity party whenever he didn't know God. He didn't have a relationship with him. And then I got to see him come to Christ and then, grow in his faith, decide to become a spiritual leader and really pursue God through different hardships. And what was amazing is I saw his relationships, his character was the same no matter what group of people on campus it was. It was, with girls and guys, with his family, with friends, with his fraternity brothers, with his, engineering people, all they all said the same thing. Totally, yes, those guys. They all said the same things about him. And it was all positive. Nobody had anything to say against Alex McDonald. And I even saw his senior year, a lot of his close friends that he had sort of grown in his faith with, had kind of decided I'm just not going to really take this seriously anymore. And, a lot of people would say yeah, me too. But what Alex McDonald did was he leaned into his relationship with God and he continued on. And I respected that so much, that he clung to God instead of people. And so these were things that I was able to see in him before he even asked me out.
Yeah. So thank you for all that.
For sure.
Yeah, we just encourage you guys, have that non-negotiable list, evaluate your standards, Maybe just, again, the whole theme here is just to be intentional about these type of relationships. All right, last one, this is real quick. We just say prioritize your relationship with God now. For me, I actually didn't start following Jesus until my freshman year of college. And so there's just a lot I had to learn and grow and mature in as a person. And I didn't like put a time limit on or anything, but I was like, you know what, I'm just going to kind of care about that for the next little while. And actually didn't end up dating anyone until I did date Meagan that 1 year out of college. But I don't regret that at all. You know, just the way I was able to grow, to just figure out my own faith, and to even use that as a framework to establish some of my own standards and plan for life. So again, I would encourage you guys as well, wherever you're at, just prioritize that relationship with God now. Because if you remember in the creation story, the first relationship that existed was God and Adam, and he created romance after that. For us, the most important relationship we can ever invest in is our relationship with God, and everything flows out of that. Awesome. Well, hey, I just want to acknowledge that probably some of the stuff we shared tonight is like countercultural, it's challenging, but I do want to leave you with this thought. You know, we talked about the stats early on and how things are kind of just bleak for marriage in general in our culture. If you want something different, you have to do something different. If you want something different, you got to do something different. And we believe that following God's plan for romance is not to limit your joy, but it's to multiply it. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you so much, Lord, that you created us for relationship. Lord, that you made this this great privilege, that this would be something that would connect us more deeply to you, and it'd be an enjoyable part of life, God. We just thank you that you're a good God, that you give us things to enjoy. Lord, I pray for just every person in this room that you would just give us wisdom on our relationships moving forward. All these things in your name. Amen.